Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn, and with this turbulent times that we're living through and the chaos that's manifesting in our lives, both internally and externally, many people are looking for methods and techniques to alleviate the various forms of suffering that many people are undergoing now in the collective. And this is a very complex topic, but really perhaps the most powerful method of actually connecting to our authentic self is through what I'll refer to in this video as soul power. And by the soul, I'm referring to the part of us that is indestructible, that is unchangeable. And it means that this part of us that is referred to as the soul is our unique expression of the absolute, of creation itself, which is our most authentic self. Now, many people would consider to be authentic is to be vulnerable, to be self-expressive, to be open, all these sorts of things. Well, that's not necessarily correct at all, actually. And this misinterpretation of what the soul is often via the mechanism of the ego. So when we consider the soul, we also need to consider the ego in terms of what that actually means and the polarity between the ego and the soul. Now, generally in spirituality today, ego is referred to in negative terms, in a negative context, but the ego is basically the shell of our outer self. And when we are intimate with ourselves, then we can start to discover who we are really, and this is becoming in contact with our soul. And even the Latin word intimacy means innermost. So intimacy is basically to become intimate with our soul, is to know our innermost of who we really are, at our depths of our being, beyond the surface level of the ego. Because when we think of ego, we obviously think of personality. Well, persona is actually Latin for mask. So we all have this mask that we wear. It's like a costume in a way. Now, it's not necessarily bad because we all have an ego and we've all come into this lifetime to experience a certain manifestation of our ego in terms of who we identify with us as who we are, who we consider ourselves to be in this way. So it means that there is a difference, because the ego can manifest in one way in this lifetime and then manifest completely in different qualities, traits, characteristics in another lifetime. Whereas the soul is more, it's coming back to the essence of who we are in terms of how we are incarnating in each lifetime. But what can be seen actually is the qualities, the characteristics, because those life lessons that we learn, perhaps even through the vehicle of the ego, we are then actually able to integrate those into our soul journey, which is much deeper, it's much more profound. So in this way, the journey of the soul is a basically direct reflection of the journey of evolution itself and the quality of our soul, which is really something that is a reflection of how evolved we are in certain aspects of our life, and perhaps other places not so evolved. So this is important because the soul is really wanting to gain experience, and at the deepest levels, the soul agreements, the karma that we choose to experience in this lifetime, the reaction of previous actions, is ultimately because of decisions made before incarnation and the requirements that the soul has to grow. So this is where the polarity between the ego and the soul is so relevant, because if you would choose that level of ego when you come into this lifetime, most people, and I'm not saying everyone, but most people would want to be like rich, they want to be good looking, they want to be successful, they may want to be famous, maybe. But a lot of the qualities that people worship in this celebrity culture today, and the people that people praise, if you think about it, whether they're sports people or musicians or actors or just celebrities, they all have these qualities. And it's very infrequently that people praise genuine humanitarians, people who are genuinely spiritually awakened, beyond all this hype and spin of the world of the influencer and marketing that you see today. So at a certain level, the soul is perhaps guiding this journey, but it's in the background. And the goal of the awakening the soul is to bring our connection to the soul into the foreground. Because as I said, if the ego is in charge of running our destiny, then many people, I'm not saying everyone, would actually choose to make life so much easier for ourselves. So why is it then that people have particularly in the time we're living through now, that people have various quite intense challenges, whether it's being homeless, you know, the financial issues that are challenging so many people now, health issues and so on. Because there's very few people at the level of the ego that would choose as a destiny to get cancer, to die of cancer, to have a reaction to a certain form of medication, to go through a divorce, to experience some form of abuse, to have financial challenges, to have various health problems, whatever, autoimmune problems, whatever you can see across the spectrum of suffering. Why would anyone choose that? Well, the question that needs to be asked is at what level and who is making that choice in the first place? So then we come back to this realization that the soul is actually this incredibly complex entity. I mean entity in a positive context now, that we are actually wanting to discover more the motivations of the soul. The motivations of the ego are always fairly transparent in people's motivations today. But what is the motivation of the soul? And particularly in this time, what I'm suggesting is that we need to develop this soul power to get through this turbulent period that we're going through, which in my view is going to radically intensify from this year onwards for the collective. For many people it already has begun to really genuinely intensify, but particularly the economic issues, what I'm referring to specifically. So this soul power, what is the soul power? Well, when I use the word power, the context I'm using it in is not that it's becoming financially powerful or socially powerful or politically powerful, that we are intimate with the soul so we can then integrate the lessons that the soul needs, and we can have this endurance and this resilience at a soul level, not through this power, this determination, this willpower, but this relentless thirst for experience, for evolution, for growth. When we access our soul, we're capable of experiencing. And this is a very, very powerful metaphysical concept and place to arrive at on your journey. Because in the spiritual landscape that I see today, particularly in this New Age subculture, that people are wanting to outsource their wisdom to anyone and anything and any entity on demand. And whether that's people that are into channeling or connecting with their guides, and I'm not saying necessarily this is a bad thing per se, but there's this high idea of connecting with, ETs, spirits, ascended masters, mediumship, all these sorts of things. And yet there's such little talk of this connection to our soul, our jivatman as we refer to it in yoga, which in my view should be our reference point for wisdom, because it is entirely authentic and entirely intimate and knows us, in an incredible way. And that is the journey of realization as well. So it has a tandem component to it that is part of the journey to self-realization, to enlightenment, to nirvana, whatever word you want to use, is actually the discovery of our soul, this part where we have this transmigration, that the soul moves from body to body through incarnation. And so my concern here is that there is such little reference point with this really deep connection to our heart, because in the Tantric tradition there is a direct relationship between our heart and our soul. And the Anahata chakra, the name for the heart chakra in Sanskrit, actually means unstruck, indestructible, which is having this reference to this soul component of who we are, this connection to our heart, our true heart. And this is avoided in this spiritual bypassing phenomenon of the New Age, where people are much more concerned with being connected to ETs and wanting to invite all these entities into their world, into their being, into their aura. And basically in my view, this comes from a clear place of disempowerment. And you can see this with many of the personalities that prolific in the New Age, in that their life is actually a reflection of this disempowerment. It's just not an attitude in terms of connecting to these entities or whoever, but their life itself. And it's because of this disempowerment, this spiritual bypassing, which is an effect, at least in part, of not being connected to our soul, to be centered, to be balanced, to know who we are, to know what we've come to experience. Because why would anyone choose to have a life of being addicted to drugs, or being a victim of violence, or being dying in a war, all these sorts of things? Why? Because the soul, in the infinite wisdom of the soul, needs this experience to generate this more elevated, more refined consciousness, even as it would be perceived as suffering, as making mistakes, as all these things. But the soul power, the alignment with the soul power, it gives us the ability to understand this journey from a more elevated place, a place of a deeper wisdom, where we can then we're able to embody and integrate our soul, and it therefore pushes the ego into the background, not ever completely. And people who are saying they've conquered their ego and so on, that's very evident when people haven't, let's say that. But it means that the soul can shine through, and there is more of a cohesion between the soul and the ego, because the ego, longing to be successful and perhaps famous, perhaps rich, all these things, all these desires, whereas the soul desire, as it is seen from the place of evolution, is radically different. And this means that we're able to, this soul power, to get through this time, it gives us this endurance for life, because as we age biologically, we perhaps lose our enthusiasm, or we lose our zest for life. Whereas you can see that people are actually more connected to their soul. They may be much older, like beyond midlife, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. They have this authentic self-expression and this joy of life, this gratitude, this celebration, and this zest for life. And it's not determined on biological age, or how much ojazz someone has, or how much vitality someone has. It's the vitality of the soul, which is eternally springing forth day by day and carries them. And it can be seen with people that have like good sense of humor, people who are jolly, people who are upbeat. And I'm not talking about this toxic positivity that's around today. I'm talking about people who may not always be happy in this sort of shiny personal development, kind of way, but they have more of this glow of life about them. There is a certain connection that they embody to their soul, and some people actually do this spontaneously. But this will be one of the big themes actually at the Easter retreat this year in Gold Coast hinterland. I'll put the link available. The soul power, how to become more intimate with your soul, how to help awaken the soul and be carried through life by the soul, because the soul is eternal in this way. And whatever people tell you about someone is soulless, or someone has this qualities or whatever, the soul will endure. It is resilient by its very design, if you want to think of it like that. There's something pretty big moving down there. And anyway, so this is a real, it is a power, but it's not a power in the context of the word we usually use this word power, but it is like riding on the wave of the soul. And the more we can love, the more we can have this state of self-love, the more we can celebrate life itself, the more we can have this graciousness through our suffering and not be so attached to this mask. It doesn't necessarily mean vulnerable, pouring your heart out on the internet, but what it means is there is a certain dignity. And this is going to be something, the more we can genuinely embody these qualities as we move through these turbulent years, that you'll see that it will make things much easier, because the soul has a wisdom, and the more we can tap into it, the more we can understand this wisdom. We can understand the motivations and decode at a causal level, which is important, cause and effect in terms of how the soul is navigating through our life, and even some more aspects such as, why do we incarnate now? What is our mission? And again, many people have this phrase which is around soul mission, that they use it in the wrong context, in the sense that the soul has a mission, like as in, it's going to be exalted in a certain way. But look at the soul mission that many people have. It can be basically just having quite a modest life and experiencing whatever the soul needs to, in terms of family relations, in terms of intimate partners, or career, and so on. And this is the experience of many people who have had near-death experiences, is that they understand that the point of incarnating is to love, to learn to love, and to learn and to integrate the wisdom of the soul. The more we can do that, the more we'll be in a state of harmony and at peace with ourselves. And also our external environment will be less significant. It will be less impacting on our identity. And this is really important, because the soul doesn't look at identity in the same way as the ego does. The soul is more enduring. It is looking at qualities of consciousness that we can embody, rather than more superficial things around the ego. And I don't mean the ego, again, in a negative context, but the ego is having its own agenda, but the soul is having a different agenda again. So this is very significant, and this will be a theme this will be a big theme going forward in the whole paradigm shift. You'll hear a lot more conversation around the soul, and less of this New Age subculture of, in terms of people outsourcing their wisdom. Obviously there has a place with connection to non-physical entities, let's hope beneficial ones, let's put it like that. But it all comes back to the wisdom of the soul, and how we are navigating the shift at the soul level. What are we called to do? And the radical change that's happening in people's life now, it is a reflection, it is an effect of the fact that the soul is starting, or not starting to, but is going through radical evolution in itself. That it's like, many of these things are what I call the nodes of growth, or the points, as I refer to it, that the soul has this sort of time lock that's uncoded in a certain moment, that this event will happen which will accelerate the evolution, which will mean moving away from different friends and relationships and so on, and creating a vacuum for new ones to come in, or a different life purpose as it manifests externally. But the one constant is the internal integration of this transcendent aspect, this immutable aspect, and that's part of the soul journey, the soul wisdom. And you'll see people starting to have this soul power. It will be phenomenal I think what will transpire, as far as, even in times of great suffering, like you look at back through history, or events and situations, various ones where people's life was perhaps in threatened or different circumstances, and you see that people somehow tap into the soul. There is some power that they're able to generate within, and kind of ride through a difficult period to survive, even at a biological level, and ultimately come out on the other side of it with this incredible wisdom. And I'm really excited to see and hear the accounts of people who will come out the other side of this incredible awakening that is happening, and to see the embodied wisdom as people show up in their authentic self from a soul level. Anyway, there's so much more to say, but thanks so much for watching. Paradigm Shift Summit, 17th to 19th of June at Mantra Mooloolaba on the Sunshine Coast, and the Easter Retreat, Gold Coast Hinterland. Check out the websites for that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We live in epic times.